when I went through the bins with this as my reference, these were the colors that I came up with. So we have two different classifications. We have what we call the local colors and what we call the non-local colors. So these are what we call local colors. Why do you think that we classify these as, like, why we use the term local for these versus those? And actually this is part of the local color range too. Have an idea? If you don't know, that's okay too. Don't know. So local in like worldly terms means stuff that's close to you, like geographically speaking. So these are the colors that are like the obvious colors in the picture. So they're like the ones that are kind of like just most obvious in the shading, right? Yeah, all of them. They're all present in there. If we were to lay these pencil tips down on top of the picture, you could find a place, I could move these pencils around and I could find a spot that is pretty similar to each of those in here. These are ones that we call non-local. Non-local means other colors you're gonna weave into your shading that are not like the obvious ones. Indigo blue is one of the most important. This is one of the, indigo blue and black grape are gonna be two colors that, yours is a little different because you're doing a lot of grayscale, but in a full color drawing, almost everybody uses these two pencils for shading. And then white. But I mean, I don't need it much, like maybe to pop this brighter, but like, we all think like, oh, the white of the eye, I have to have white, but it's not white. It's just really light yellow, right? Is there a color that you would expect me to have that I don't have?
Black.
Yep, great. We don't use black. It's all indigo blue and black grape layered together, okay? Strangely, indigo blue is actually darker than black.
That's interesting.
It is, right? But the beauty of it is that there's also some color information, so there's richness. If you looked quickly, you wouldn't be able to tell that's blue. It just looks black, right? So using the indigo blue allows you to really darken something, but it adds a richness that
doesn't black out the color.
Exactly. Or it just doesn't make it dull. Like black is just like thud, like, you know?
Just like one shade.
Yeah, right. And it's kind of nothing, you know? I would always prefer to shade even my shadows with something that has some color information. So look at how dark that is, but it also has a richness, okay? The indigo blue is like magic. The black grape is a cool one because it's dull, almost like a brown, but again, it has a little bit of color information.
Yeah, it's like a little bit of purple.
Right. So if you need to dull something, so like here, this value, there's a dullness to that red.
Yeah.
But it's not super dark.
It's not like a dark red. It's more like a off tone in between.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's like a less saturated, just dark, dull red. So I can use my black grape lightly in there to help capture that value. And it darkens it without it being like really dark, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's color taken care of, right? So we've got, and you may not know too, like you may look through there and be like, I don't know, here's 15 colors that I might use, bring them all. Because the important thing to know about colored pencil is that there's not a solution. There are a multitude of solutions. I could give your entire class of 24 students the same picture to shade, and everyone would do it differently. There would be similarities, but there's not one solution. So I want you to experiment. That's why we practice. That's why we practiced in the class for like 3 full class periods. So colored pencil can be done lots of ways, but I like everybody to start lightly and really paying close attention to pressure.
Yeah, that's what I do with a lot of my black and white drawings.
Great.
The shading.
Good. So we tend to, when we're given a colored pencil, we tend to like revert to coloring book, where we just kind of like crush the color to fill. You're never gonna get realism, you're never gonna get volume if you just like push as hard as you can. I shouldn't say never, it's very hard. Some people do it and do it really well. But as a rule, I like to have everyone start a little bit lighter, and I'm picking a color that's darker, but not darkest. Okay, and I'm gonna treat this. So for you, for this, it might be like so the gray scale is all in percentages. So 70%, it goes from 10% to 90%. 90 is the darkest. You might start with like a 70% gray for your initial shading. So I'm going to start by drawing an eye. It doesn't have to be exactly, you're going to reference your picture, but it doesn't have to be exactly the same. And also it would be helpful if it was similar size. Some of your classmates went really big with their tests, which is fine. But your life will be easier if it's about the same. And again, like, I don't care if it's perfect. You're just giving yourself like a practice space. So like that. So I'm gonna start with this one tone, and I'm gonna treat it like a pencil. Meaning, I'm doing the entire initial layer of shading with just one color, but I'm trying to establish volume. When I say volume, do you know what I mean? It's okay if you don't.
Yeah.
Like the three-dimensionality of something. Like you want us to be able to tell that where his brow is, it's bumping over, and then there's a divot in, and then it bumps up here. And those contours, that shape or that three-dimensionality, that's all based on value. So how light or dark your color is. Just like, you say you do a lot with pencil. It's literally, you're treating this just like a pencil drawing. How do I make a pencil darker?
Well, you just
Press harder, right. So you'll notice where it's darker, I'm pressing a little harder. Am I pressing as hard as I can anywhere? No, I'm not. So I keep it light where the value is not as dark, and I press a little harder where the value is darker. Notice how sharp my pencil tip is. The first thing I did when I came over is sharpened it.
Yeah.
What do you notice about the direction my pencil is moving as I shade?
Mostly the same direction where you're coloring.
Our first project of the year before you were here was pencil drawing. And so a lot of your classmates have heard me use all these terms before. So, shading along the contour is looking at this shape, let's say, right? So like right here, the gradient goes from darker red to lighter red. So I shade with that contour. So if it goes dark to light, my lines go like this, because it allows me to go push harder, push lighter, push lighter, push lighter, and then it's gone. If you go this way,
It's going to change the perspective.
it will, right? But it's also going to make it really hard to transition from dark to light, because you're going to have rows of like hatch marks. And I'm sure you've seen that before. Probably when you were younger, you did it, and it just like doesn't look good. So by going with the contour, that allows me to build more realistic volume. That's that three-dimensionality that we talked about.
Yeah.
Because I can very gently pull up on my pencil pressure, which allows the value to change. Now, I make this look easy because I've been doing this for a long time. It's not gonna be, probably won't be this easy for you, and that's okay. You're gonna have to work at it a little bit. Your first one's probably not gonna be good. We don't want it to be, like amazing. We want you to work at it a little bit. We want you to grow. So you have to go in with that mindset of like, it's not gonna be perfect right off the bat. I'm gonna try it, it's not gonna be great, I'm gonna try it again. It's gonna be better, probably, maybe not. Then I'm gonna try it again, So there's my first color. Put it right above the eye. So you can see the volumes start to appear. Do you see what I mean when I say that? Yeah. So now I'm gonna, once I've done this everywhere, which I'm not gonna sit and do the whole thing for you, or with you. Once I get this, and I'd go, I'd be going farther. I would take this all the way over. I'd get in here. I'd come over here. So like once I've got all of that stuff kind of blocked in with my first color, I'm gonna then come in and I'm gonna pick a color slightly lighter. I'm gonna go with my poppy red next because there's a pretty strong red-orange.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree?
Very scarlet.
Yeah. So this poppy red, so I initially had tried orange, like just straight up orange, but it was just like too Crayola, like vibrant. I liked the poppy because it was like a little more, a little less saturated, which is hard to believe because that looks pretty saturated, pretty bright. So I'm layering this in. Same idea, using pressure intentionally. Where there's more of that color, where it's darker, I'm pressing harder.
And you kind of get like the texture with that too, with like the kind of paper you're using, and like kind of get this like the skin.
Right. So the more pressure you put on the colored pencil, the waxier it becomes.
Yeah.
Some people are able to use a lot of wax, and it works really well for them. But most students have a hard time getting volume when there's lots of wax. So we build to that. If you look at my portrait here, what are the only values that you see really heavy wax on? Dark. Is there another value, like in the eye area specifically, that has more wax too, besides just the dark?
A little bit of brown.
What about those brightest brights?
Yeah.
See how like in the background I'm doing it lightly, but here I've pushed harder on my nose. So you're gonna push hardest in your darks and your lights. That's gonna push the darks back in space, and that's gonna bring the lights forward. So when you look up close, you can see the wax like pounded into the paper in those areas.
Yeah.
As we get away from it, that texture becomes less apparent, but the volume of the object really, it makes it pop out.
You can really see where it's like lightest and darkest in there.
Right, and that makes the eyeball look real, like it looks rounded. It makes my hair look like it's in shadow, which pushes that back. It pushes this back, and it brings the highlights forward. Look in my mouth. It goes back in there.
Yeah.
And that's due to taking those darkest, that indigo blue and the black grape, and pushing harder to make them go back in.
But still leaving the color there.
Right, yeah. So now I'm still working with my second color. So I would keep going everywhere. I'm, for right now, just gonna work in this area because I wanna give you a couple minutes to like try to pick some colors out before class is over. I've got this other really great color called mineral orange. It's a little too dull. Gotta give it a quick little sharpen. Colored pencils break easily, so you have to make sure you're not twisting your hands as you sharpen. You want to try to keep the pencil as straight as possible as you turn it, or else you'll chip the tip. So I'm gonna bring this in. It's like my next lightest. It's less saturated too, which I like. I like a nice low saturation tone. I feel like it's just more realistic. So you can see it's the difference from that to that.
Yeah.
And then it's still feeling like it's like not quite red enough. So I've got my crimson red, which is like the really, really red, like fire engine-y kind of. All these layers are pretty light. Like this is how light I'm pressing. But because there's wax on the paper.
And they're adding up together.
Exactly, right. Well, it lets the wax on the paper picks up more of the next wax. So it's like it builds. So look how easily I can make that red richer. What I'm noticing, because I'm constantly looking back and forth between these, is now my dark isn't quite as dark. So I'm going to come back with my Tuscan, that first color I chose.
Yeah.
I'm going to layer back. It's not like a math equation where like you do step 1, which leads to step 2, which leads to step 3, which leads to step 4. Here, art, you start with step 1, you go to step 2, you realize, oh, I need more step 1. You go back to 1. Then you go 2, 3, 4, then you come back to 2. And then you go back to 1, then you go back to 3. It's this constant back and forth. It feels complicated.
Yeah.
But the longer you're in it, the more you look, the more sense it's going to make. So you'll hear me talk a lot about analysis. Analysis is just looking at something and figuring out what needs to happen. Art is just as much about mark making as it is analysis. So you can be a great mark maker, but if you can't kind of take in what you're doing and compare and contrast, you're not going to get as far as you could. So that's why, like, a lot of times I'm telling your class to, like, take the noise level down a little bit, just a little, so that we can make sure we're really focusing on our work. Remember we talked about black grape?
Yeah.
We're gonna bring a little black grape in, see if we can darken that part up a little bit. It's not gonna take much. That little bit of pressure there. Now, where it's darker, though, you can't see it because I traced over that. But where it's darker on his lash line, I'm pushing a little harder.
Yeah.
Not even with my indigo yet. I'm just black grape. Look at the difference that makes with like a really intentional, harder line.
When you get farther back, and it even looks more darker.
Right? And it like that, this form starts to really come to life, just like it does here. You'll notice when I come down here, I'm not just coming down. Notice how I swing around to kind of like connect me back. Do you see how it does that here?
Yeah, that little area.
Yep, that's that analysis that I was talking about. It's looking and translating what you see into the marks you make. This comes down. I don't even think it's dark enough to require me to use indigo. Like I was using it here to show you. I don't think it needs it. Do you think it needs it?
Not really,
No, because it's really not that dark. So if you look here, I pushed it a little bit in here because I wanted to add a little more dimension, but it doesn't really need it. All right. So then from there, I want to show you real quickly how to build a little bit brighter because this gets pretty bright. I've got cream here. It's like a nice alternative to white. The problem is my paper color and the cream pencil are almost exactly the same.
So you can't really see how much you're pressing down or how much you're putting down until you add more color.
And it's just hard to know. So I'm actually gonna, because of the color of my paper, I'm gonna pivot and get a little bit of white to start because I want to be able to get that really bright, rich yellow. If I put the yellow down on its own, it doesn't pop quite in the same way that like there's like a whiter quality to that than this yellow, right?
Yeah.
So if I start with the white and then I layer my yellow on top, and I really pushed hard with that white. It's still not quite what I want, but I gotta feather this out. I'm going around the contour. Because see how it fades this way, but it also fades this way and that way. So I'm lightening out like this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Good. I'm gonna fade it down into my orange tones just lightly, still following that same contour. Now I gotta come back. Remember I talked about it's not step 1, then 2, then 3, then done.
Yeah.
So I did 1, which was white, then 2, which was the canary yellow. Now I'm coming back to 1, because it needs to be brighter. And then the trick to get it to look brighter, I think, is come around it with this mineral orange. I feel like it's a little too yellow right now. Like when I look at the picture, I don't see that intense of a yellow. So I'm gonna try to like pull it back slightly with my, yeah. And this is that low saturation, duller orange, which I'm hoping will tone that yellow back a little bit. Got that crease there, just a little wrinkle in his eyelid. Still not super happy with the yellow, but it's okay, it's gonna work. Once everything else is around it, it'll work okay. Now that we're so far down, I wanna get a little bit more of what's happening here. This was gonna be a real short demo, but we got cruising here and just figured I'd keep going with it with you. So again, with the analysis, I just keep looking, and when I see a need, I just go back to that pencil. It's not, you're not doing a coloring book where it's like paint by number. Like this is kind of, you know, a pretty set, like this is this color, this is this. Colored pencil's a lot more give and take.
Yeah, since there's so many different colors you could use.
Right, and you can't approach it like I'm gonna do this color and be done with it. You have to be really good about like give and take.
And adjust it as you go along.
Exactly. It's so important. Grab my black grape, try to dull it down a little bit, darken it a little bit. I think the Tuscan's more appropriate though. It's that more brownish. There's another color called black cherry, which is kind of like this is Tuscan red right here. Black cherry is a slightly cooler version. Do you see the difference there?
Yeah.
So if I'm looking here and thinking, well, my shading is a little too warm, if I want to get a similar value but cooler, I could have chosen black cherry.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to keep going with the Tuscan right now. It's a very, very hard color to capture. So I want you to know color is far less important than value is. So I don't want you stressing about the exact color. Value is what really matters. So now I've got my cream and I'm pushing a little harder to get it to show up. And I want to get rid of this yellow, it's just so vibrant. So my cream should be able to help me. Now notice this light color, see how it changes the texture of your underneath colors?
Yeah, it kind of blends in together.
Yes, exactly.
Kind of like a colorless blender.
It's exactly what it's like, you're right. All of the lightest colors end up looking a little like a colorless blender. So then, oh, okay. I think that's far enough. It's kind of a good spot to end for the day.